Tom, I guess we'll start with what I'm kind of jokingly referring to as tomorrow's cage match in Montreal between Justin Trudeau and François Legault. What are you expecting?
That's a great question. And things change very rapidly in politics, as you know. And I watched Trudeau's longish soliloquy defending the carbon tax yesterday. And I especially heard the rather harsh words he had for premiers who are not holding up their end of the bargain to reduce greenhouse gases and fight climate change, realizing that he's in a bit of a partisan trap. He fought back, and he fought back gamely. He went after Poilievre, too. And Poilievre will, of course, try to deny that he's a climate change denier. But when you're claiming that you don't have to do anything to fight climate change, yeah, you're a climate change denier. And that's where Poilievre is, of course. So I think that Trudeau is starting to sense that it's about time for him to fight back. So he's fighting back against Poilievre with the strongest stuff I've ever seen. He's defining himself as someone who doesn't mind taking the political heat to do the right thing for future generations. And I think he's wearing that very well. With regard to Legault tomorrow, I have said that you're talking about a fantasy cage match. I'll talk to you about a fantasy political thought. When I was watching Trudeau yesterday, watching the fact that he's digging in finally starting to fight back, I said to myself, and it's in my paper, by the way, that's online, went online yesterday with my CTV article. Essentially, is this a possibility, tomorrow's meeting, for a just watch me moment? In other words, is the slightly exhausted, not fed up, but tired of the nonsense Justin Trudeau, who rarely shows up, is that Justin Trudeau going to show up to a meeting with Legault tomorrow, and is he going to do like usual, be a carpet for Legault to walk on and do nothing about Bill 21 and start saying nothing about the loss of English communities' rights under Bill 96 and just try to make friends with Legault because he'd like to have him for the next election? Or is that Trudeau with a little bit of spunk that we saw yesterday going to show up and say there's not a country in the world that would let a subnational government like a province or a state or a landa decide for it who gets to reunite with their family? It's a basic human right, and our government does not ever intend on giving that to Quebec or any other province. If Trudeau does that, I have a feeling we might be watching a completely different ball game for the next couple of months politically, Aaron.
I wonder, though, Tom, and this came up before when we were chatting. This is the first time in I don't know how long that not only are the Liberals behind the Bloc in the province, but behind the federal Conservatives. I don't know when the last time that ever happened was, but you'd have to think that's going to weigh in on however Justin Trudeau does deal with François Legault tomorrow, wouldn't it?
Right, but you're forgetting another key element in this play, which is the Bloc Québécois, which is the most fragile and flexible and fickle vote that there is. The Bloc Québécois is a parking lot. Don't take it from me. François Legault says they're useless, and Justin Trudeau also agrees that they're useless. And I actually believe they're completely useless for having seen them very up close and personal for years and years. But they fulfill a role when people don't know which way to go. They go back to the Bloc, as they did. We had them down to 4 seats in the 2011 Orange Wave. So they've got a leader now who speaks quite well. He's articulate. He's got an opinion on everything and nothing, but they're completely useless. They're not going to actually accomplish anything. So I think that Quebecers know that. And if there is peril in the home, if there's a sense that Poilievre could win, because Poilievre's numbers, yes, Poilievre's numbers are better here than any Conservative since Mulroney, but we're still a long way away from an election. And there's a group think, and I know several of them, amongst the Conservative advisors here in Quebec. And by the way, Poilievre's got some very good advisors here in Quebec. Their wishful thinking amongst that group is Quebecers are all going to flock one way. Once they see that we're about to form a government, they're not going to be left out of the government. They're going to flock to us. I don't think that that's necessarily true, Aaron. I think that there's a really serious chance that Quebecers, sensing that Pierre Poilievre could win, know that they have enough seats, 78 in the province to be exact, to block the guy from ever getting a majority. And I see that is much more likely from Quebecers' voting patterns than the idea that somehow they're going to decide that they're going to vote for this guy that they really don't like. And especially Quebec women don't like him. Poll after poll shows that Quebec women just don't trust this guy and don't like him, don't like his attitude, don't like his anger, and don't like his politics.
Okay, so we know tomorrow the key issue, and it's no secret here, François Legault's been talking it up now for a while, will be immigration. He just wants a big fat check. How does Justin Trudeau satisfy that without handing him one of those?
So two different things, immigration and taking care of people who are coming in asking for asylum. So that is something that is costing Quebec a fortune. That's not part of the deal with the feds. It's not true that we ever agreed to take in hundreds of thousands of people, depending on the counting in the day, and some of them leave the province. It's a bit more it's a bit more complicated than the simple approach of Legault, which is send me a big fat check and I won't even justify the numbers for you. We just learned this week that the CAC's not very good at bookkeeping. So I don't blame Mark Miller, the immigration minister federally, or Justin Trudeau for saying, we'll sit down and look at this stuff with you. But with regard to immigration writ large, Quebec has always had, going all the way back to Colin Couture, back in the 70s, Quebec's always had a completely different deal because of our culture, because of our language, because of the differences. Quebec's had more of a say than the other provinces. The other provinces are getting more and more of a say these days, but still Quebec is ahead. This family reunification category, that's the nub. So this is, once you're here, you've brought in your family, you've set up, you're working, and you want to start bringing your family with you. This is where Legault wants to say no. It's not that he wants jurisdiction. He wants to say no to bringing people in, for many of these from cultural communities who, the people who are already here, who will bring in their family members, and they're the best guides. They already know our society, its norms, how things work. They're working, and this is the best way to get new citizens in. But Legault, and I was on a panel show with him last night, Mr. Dubreuil, and he's the commissioner of French language here in Quebec, and he goes straight to the same thing always, Aaron. He talks about the fact that there's just too much English being spoken in Quebec. So that is exactly the starting point of the famous François Legault, who once said, in the words of Graham Fraser, who went on to become official language commissioner, this guy is famous for having said he hates the English. It shows time and again. If Trudeau has the moxie, the strength of character to start standing up to Legault, finally, we might actually have some fun watching this thing tomorrow. Who knows? Maybe the cage fight will indeed have some fireworks.
We shall wait and see. I want to get one last thing in, Tom, before we go. You wrote a piece in the Journal yesterday. It's online now. The headline is Le Français de nos jeunes, la faute des Anglos, ? And you brought up a lot of issues in here. But at the end, making the point that what we need to avoid, of course, is French being perceived, especially by young people, as something imposed on them.
Yeah. And this is coming up more and more. Young people, first of all, live online. The language that they're using online is English. One of my grandsons is in grade 5, and he's following he loves math, and he's following a really cool math course, but it's only available in English. And he didn't really have that much English a couple of years ago. He's in French school, but now he's doing this thing in English. That's the real world. And that is the openness that the young generation is bringing to this. And by the way, that's the hope. I was mentioning before that Quebec women weren't very fond of Poilievre. There's a very interesting analysis that was done that if you go online, the people who are the most active online, on the male side, Quebec men are angry, and they tend to be very right-wing conservatives. Quebec women who are online tend to be strong progressives, openness, values of respecting others and differences. This is something that's being picked up, of course. Remember Aaron O'Toole saying that Poilievre practices politics by algorithm. He does everything with a deep data set. He's got tons of polling and focus groups. Everything that comes out of his mouth has been weighed and tested 5 times. There's very little spontaneity to him. He's got his own shtick that he pulls out all the time, but all of his substantial stuff is directed at an audience that's been hand-chosen for him with his deep data set. Trudeau is finally starting to learn how to play the game. It took them a while to figure out the enigma that was Pierre Poilievre, but I have to tell you, we're in for quite a fight if there is an election. I don't know if Trudeau's going to stick around. My betting would still be that he's not, because his numbers are that bad, and he's got to try to give some hope to his party of winning the next election. If it looks like he hasn't got a chance, I do think that he'll step aside. He'll probably give him at least the summer to look at that. But for now, stay tuned. Nothing more fun in politics than a good set to. Let's see what happens between Legault and Trudeau tomorrow for starters.
Can I just ask, as we wrap up here, with respect to the column, to the piece you wrote, do you get the sense that this is going to be sort of the next level of they're taking this, let's blame the Anglos for what's happening now? Jean-François Lisée wrote a column, I guess it's going back a couple of weeks ago now, pointing out what was happening. He says, according to sources in some schools where people are pushing back against native Quebecers, against teens. Is that the next approach here, do you think?
Well, I read that piece by Jean-François, but I think you did a very good job of summarizing, because he's always referring, somebody told me, somebody told them that, somebody told them this. So I'm not sure that there's a lot of science involved in that, or social science or anything else. But I do know that I have in my hot little hands the 15-page aide memoire that was just published by the Office québécois de la langue française for the bilingual hospitals and social service institutions in Quebec. And one of the sentences at the beginning of it is, this document has no legal value. For that, you've got to go read the statute. But the only thing that the average administrator is going to have on their desk is this thing hot off the presses at the Office québécois de la langue française. And why is that important? Well, if you read the thing, anything that they didn't get out of Bill 96, they were pushing for even more and more and more. There's stuff that they didn't get. That's in their brochure, their aide memoire. So what they're doing, the same thing they did when they stopped issuing the certificates of eligibility. They're going after the Anglo universities, and now we find out that they're going after the bilingual institutions, and it's so surreptitious. It's so sneaky. They're going in, they've said, oh, here's the aide memoir. This is just to help you know it's there. But if you read the thing, they have to admit that it's not even the law. It's what they want. And I hope that, there's a good lawyer out there working for one of the other of the big hospitals that will get a mandate to actually write 15 pages of what's in the law, not what the bureaucrats would have the law say. That's the type of thing we're dealing with, Aaron. This is an across the board, across the whole landscape, this approach by people who just want to hunker down, go after things that are not the same as them. The ability of Legault to continue to say with Dubreuil that the problem is there's too much English in the streets, they have no evidence to back that up. But it shows a mean-spiritedness towards others, and it's not the country that we want to live in, and it's not the province that we want to live in, but there's nobody articulating back. So yes, I write this stuff. I write it also in the Journal de Montréal, and I go after them, because there's a study after study shows that Quebec Francophone kids can't write French properly. I said, so that must be the fault of the English too. And it was interesting, Marc-André Leclerc, who writes also in the Journal de Montréal, one of my colleagues, and he's a conservative. He used to be the chief of staff to Andrew Scheer. He wrote a scathing paper 2 days ago where he mocked the whole bit about the appliances and the language on the appliances. And he just said, really, this is the Quebec that we want to live in? So what we're seeing now is that there are people coming forward in places, across the board, including in the Journal de Montréal. Leclerc and I are good examples of that, just saying, would you please look at what's becoming of this place? This is what Legault has wrought. And French should not be just a language that's imposed. It should be something that people take a shine to, that they want to share as part of our common culture. That's the good side. That's what the young people are offering as hope. Legault right now is just pushing kids away. They're going to make their own decisions, and they're going to be drifting more and more. You're going to see more and more English because they're not seeing French as something that's attractive and worthwhile.
Tom Mulcair. Tom, thank you.